Alright, so part 2 of Act 1, Scene 2 of The Tempest, starting on page 44. Okay, so we've learned about Caliban's background, about Sycorax, and we've seen the difference in the level of treatment between Ariel and Caliban. So we've talked about the fact that Ariel is a servant to Prospero, but Caliban's a slave, and the different types of language that's associated with the treatment of that. Dull thing I say so here that Caliban, who I now keep in service. So it's just a euphemism for slavery, and the word slave is repeated many, many times throughout the text. It really reinforces that post-colonial idea of putting the other into slavery, which makes us sort of question Prospero a little bit, and we don't really know his justification for the way he treats Caliban right now. We've learned his justification, or we've discovered his justification for the Tempest that he created. And interestingly, with the actual Tempest itself, I'm not sure if you saw the link that I posted, but pathetic fallacy was one of the techniques. Does anyone know what pathetic fallacy is?
Isn't fallacy like a myth? But the word fallacy itself.
Yeah, so basically a pathetic fallacy is where the weather reflects the inner emotions of a character. So say, for example, if a character is depressed, they might make a comment about the weather being dull and gloomy or something like that. So what could the Tempest represent?
Anger, rage.
Yeah, anger, rage, vengeance, all those kind of things. So you could maybe use that, or it could be a symbol for that with Prospero. But pathetic fallacy could potentially be something that you could pursue with that. So, yeah. And so anyway, Prospero mentions Caliban and Sycorax, and then he goes on more about his art. He says, "It was mine art when I arrived and heard thee that made gape the pine and let thee out." So he's this saviour figure. His discovery of Ariel has been serendipitous for him because why?
Because he has more power now and someone who will do his bidding.
Yeah. So he's got his own art that's obviously improving, but he's also got Ariel who can do all these things that he's not really himself capable of doing necessarily, but because he controls Ariel, he has so much more power. And Ariel refers to him as master. So what is ironic about Ariel being in servitude to Prospero and
He is more powerful than Prospero and still bows down to him.
Yeah. So even though he's more powerful than Prospero, he ironically has less power because he is in servitude. So that's an interesting point there, and that could be integrated into a post-colonial discourse about the Tempest, and about how discovery has different ramifications for different individuals, and maybe about how perhaps we talked about how perhaps Ariel was more like Caliban when Sycorax came to the island. Maybe it's more of reflective of the way that Caliban is with Prospero now. And because Ariel was imprisoned, he's learned or discovered that he needs to be more careful in what he does to be able to gain his freedom, whereas Caliban was free and was never captured before. And there's that resentment there and that lack of obedience to Prospero. And after all the events, Caliban says that he'll be wise hereafter and seek for grace. So perhaps that discovery that Caliban's made, he discovered that he needs to essentially play the game when it comes to those in power of him. So maybe the same way that Ariel is playing the game now with Prospero, Caliban realises that that's what he needs to do. So it's debatable to what extent Caliban actually repents for what he's done. Perhaps he's just discovered another facet of his life and how to get by. And Prospero threatens to put Ariel back into the oak tree. Ariel came out of a pine tree, which isn't as strong as oak, and he said that he'll put him in there for 12 years in an oak tree, which is harder to escape from, if he doesn't do his bidding. So what's happening with Prospero is that at this stage, the audience probably isn't feeling too much sympathy for him, and he's being sort of painted as power hungry and a little bit vengeful, which changes during the play, so he experiences that level of change. But it's just interesting that Prospero is threatening to do the same, but even worse than what Sycorax did to Ariel. So there is an element of fear there. Ariel said, "That's my noble master. What shall I do? Say what? What shall I do?" Why has Ariel repeated that line?
To show how how obedient he is.
Yeah.
Rather than just, sort of dolefully saying, "Oh, what do you want me to do?"
Yeah. In emphasizing his willingness to serve Prospero so that he can become free. Prospero says, "To no sight but thine and mine, invisible to every eyeball else." So there's another element of discovering what is unknown and unseen, and how that impacts the castaways. That unseen Ariel, the music that Ferdinand hears, can contribute to the way that different discoveries are responded to. He calls Caliban his slave again, which reinforces their relationship. Miranda said, "'Tis a villain, sir, I do not love to look on." So we've talked about Caliban being the other. Okay, so you've got the colonizers, which is Miranda and Prospero, and then you've got people or beings who are not like the colonizers, and they're referred to as the other. Okay, so basically any indigenous population in colonial times was the other. And so the other is painted as evil and lowborn over here. Ariel is painted as a bit more exotic because Ariel is more aligned to the expectations and values that the colonizers hold. So there's that. I know we're focusing a lot on post-colonialism, but you can link that really well with discovery in a broader context, and about how the discovery of the colonizing of a place can have varying ramifications and question values and assumptions by the audience and also the colonizer and also the colonized. So there's a lot that you can do with that. But then he says, "We cannot miss him. He does make our fire, fetching our wood, and serves in offices that profit us." So Prospero acknowledges what?
That Caliban actually has a role to play rather than just dismissing.
So what did we say? Ariel serves Prospero's what?
Magical needs.
Magical needs, or his desires. And Caliban serves
the physical needs.
The physical needs. Who do you think they probably need more?
Ariel. Well, Caliban.
Caliban, because it's the basic needs.
Like the necessities of life.
Yeah, the food, the water. Because what do they say? They say, "What ho, slave Caliban, thou earth, thou speak." So earth, what's he connected to?
The land.
The land, nature. Okay, he's connected to that life source that Prospero, despite all his magic, he can't connect with the same way that Caliban does, because he's not native to that island. He doesn't have that natural connection. Even though Caliban is not necessarily, he's born there, but is he native or is Ariel native? I mean, I guess they both are, but
in technicality.
In technicality, more so than sort of heritage or culture. Okay, there could be more culture with Ariel, because Caliban says the island is full of sounds that hurt not, or something like that. So that we understand that the island is quite a magical, supernatural sort of place. So that could be more likely to align with Ariel. So he calls him a slave, whatever. Caliban is more representative of the earth, whereas Ariel is more representative of wind and fire and that kind of supernatural sort of power.
I thought I would have put Ariel with air and Prospero with fire, because Prospero's got the rage of a fire.
Yeah, he could be. Yeah. So Ariel's definitely air, like all the kind of elements and the transformation of those kind of things. Whereas Caliban's very set. He resembles the earth because he's so.
Set in his ways.
Well, yeah, he's set in his ways, but his physicality is something that apparently is closer to an animal than a human. So he's kind of in a cusp between a man or a beast. We're not quite sure exactly what he is because he's referred to as different things. So how does he speak to Ariel? He says, "Fine apparition, my quaint Ariel." He's just called. Sorry, what you say?
As if he was like a son or like someone close, rather than how he talks to Caliban.
Yeah. So the way that he talks to Caliban is called invective language. So maybe write that on your sheet. INVECTIVE. I'll say it one more time. INVECTIVE. Invective language is language that is deliberately insulting and nasty. You wouldn't use the word nasty in your analysis, you'd find a better word. But basically, everything that Prospero says to Caliban is invective. Alright? Whereas he's really nice to Ariel. And it shows Prospero's values and how Ariel's otherness, the things that make Ariel different from the colonizers, is really valued by Prospero. But the things that make Caliban different from the colonizers is not valued by them. Okay?
Would Prospero only treasure Ariel more because Ariel is magical and Caliban's not?
And obedient as well. Yeah, I think that obedience has a lot to do with their relationship. You know, if someone does what you say, you're probably going to like them or have a more positive relationship with them compared to someone who is consistently resisting you and saying nasty things to you and that kind of thing. So I think it's a multifaceted relationship there. Yeah. Prospero calls Caliban a slave. Thou poisonous slave got by the devil himself. So he's comparing him to a devil. Caliban says, "With raven's feather from unwholesome fen, drop on you both. The southwest blow on you and blister you all over." So what's he using to punish Prospero, or to say he's going to prosper?
The wind.
The
because
wind.
The southeasterly wind is a warm, or southwesterly, sorry, it's a warm wind.
Yeah. Okay. So and a raven's feather. So he's making these nature references, and he wishes to use the nature of the island against Prospero, which he never can do really because he doesn't have any magical power. But his references to nature all through his speeches are really indicative of his own
ties.
His own ties to it, but his own sort of mismatched pastiche of a culture. He's part witch, he's part natural native. His identity is not fixed because I don't think he really knows who or what he is anyway. Okay, so then Prospero says, "For this be sure, tonight thou shalt have cramps, thou shalt be pinched as thick as honeycomb, each pinch more stinging than the bees that made him." So why does Prospero punish Caliban physically?
Because he seems to see the only way that he'll make Caliban listen, because he hasn't responded to kindness and he didn't respond to
He did
verbal
respond to
insults.
kindness. He showed him everything on the island.
And then tried to rape his
Prospero
But
daughter.
then trying to rape his daughter because...
Yeah. Well, that's the only girl in the whole island.
Yeah, but
and his idea of sexual relations...
You just see the animals, doing it.
Yeah, he's got the innate, the
animalistic
Yeah, it's primitive, so you can't
population.
blame him for that.
But still,
it's the only girl in the
But
island.
that's a taboo. That's a taboo for the colonizer society and for our society. But for his, he doesn't even have a society. He's probably been alone on the island for at least 12 years by himself, raising himself. What moral compass does he really have? He doesn't know that that's necessarily wrong. It doesn't. So there's two sides to that story. Of course, as a father,
It's like the settlers trying to make the natives assume
yeah,
that they should already know this.
yeah. Yeah, and these what's called it's called the hidden curriculum. So basically, the underlying unspoken rules that govern a society. You know, proximity. You don't if there's no one on the bus. Oh, sorry, there's one person on the bus. Do you go and sit right next to them?
No.
That's an unspoken rule that you don't do that. But no one actually says on the handbook of how to interact with people, don't sit next to someone when there's a bus, or this is a boys thing that I don't really know much about. But say you're going to the bathroom in a public place, gentleman,
You don't look
do you
over.
go right next to
And
the
you don't
person
stand
that's at the
I just whip it out.
what I'm trying to say is that when you're at the urinal, is it okay to, when there's no one else at the urinal, there's one person, do you go right next to the person that's going and go right next to them? Is that a thing?
Well, females don't do it either. Like, if there are 3 cubicles,
Yeah, you
a
don't
female
go
will
right
always
next
go
to the person,
they
you
will
go,
not.
you know? So it's just that kind of hidden, unspoken
It's
curriculum.
like it's a respect thing too.
Yeah, but we've been cultured
Yeah.
and raised to
Calvin.
adhere to that. He doesn't have any. His mum probably died when he was 11, I think, around about young enough to not necessarily know. And apparently, she was such a witch and such a bad person that what morals did she instill in him? We don't know what they are. We don't even know that she was a necessarily evil person. How is she any different to Prospero? Prospero's brought his child to an island that's not his. He's imprisoned Caliban, the native to the island. Sycorax has come with her son
And
and imprisoned the other native. What's the difference?
The only reason she's painted badly is, again, the female thing. Like I
Yeah.
said, the female's always painted to be
Because she's a woman, because she's a powerful woman. She's magical as well. What's the difference?
bad. There isn't.
There isn't really a difference. She's gone to the island because she's done something bad. Prospero's gone to the island because he couldn't organise himself to rule the country that he was supposed to rule. There's not much of a difference between them, but he sees himself so separate from her. Do you think there's a really famous line in Shakespearean, I think it's Romeo and Juliet, and it says, "I do think that thee doth protest too much." Has anyone heard that before? Yeah? What do you think it means?
Is it?
Stop whinging.
Yeah.
Story?
Stop
Stop
whinging.
whinging.
Because protest, if you were to...
Kind
if I go back
of.
to Shakespearean, I think more so along the lines of, why are you even saying that you're no different?
Well, let's think about it
He says in the
from
play.
a perspective where I think there's in the play, I'm probably wrong, but I think there's innuendo that he is homosexual or something like that. And he keeps denying, and really fervently denies.
So,
And then saying, I think you protest too much. I think you're going too far.
and
When actually, it's kind of a reflection of the fear and anxiety, like the insecurity that person has about
So
something
like
particular.
Calvin paints her so bad so that he looks
Prospero, yeah,
feels better about
paints her
himself.
so bad
Yeah.
that
so he's protesting too much to make himself look better.
to distance himself from her, because it might reflect an insecurity that he has, that he is exactly like a Sycorax person. So, and yeah, the fact that he's never met her or doesn't really know anything about her other than what Ariel has said. What does Caliban say about Prospero to Trinculo and
that
Stefano?
he's a tyrannical ruler.
Says exactly the same thing that Ariel says about Sycorax. It's exactly the same. So that's really interesting, and I think that, Prospero could have made that personal discovery, or hasn't really realised he's made that personal discovery, or it could be when he abjures his magical powers that he actually has come to that personal discovery that he is in fact not very much different to Sycorax. So yeah, that's something really interesting. Okay, now this Caliban's monologue here is very, very, very important for a post-colonial reading. He says, This island's mine, by Sycorax my mother, which thou takest from me. When thou camest first, thou strokest me, and madest much of me, wouldst give me water with berries in it, and teach me how to name the bigger light, and how the less, that burn by day and night. And then I loved thee, and I showed thee all the qualities of the isle, the fresh springs, brine pits, barren place, and fertile. Cursed be I that did so. All the charms of Sycorax, toads, beetles, bats light on you. For I am all the subjects that you have, which first was mine own king. And here you stye me in this hard rock, whilst you do keep me from the rest of the island. So this is it's actually a really emotional speech from Caliban. And it obviously depends on his delivery, but think about all the things like Prospero has taken this island from him. That was his rightful, his mother had it first and he believes that it's his rightful claim. And he shows that they had a really good relationship, that Caliban loved Prospero and showed him all these wonderful things and all the secrets that he'd found. And he regrets it. He said, "Cursed be I that did so." Okay? For I'm all the subjects that you have. Caliban's the only person that Prospero really controls. That's his lesser. He treats Ariel as kind of more of a more.
Caliban probably wouldn't know that Ariel's in Prospero's care either, because if Miranda doesn't know.
Maybe.
So
that's a good point. He doesn't know that Ariel's
subject, because
the
Miranda
Ariel's.
doesn't know that Ariel's there.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So
He might not know. Yeah, didn't think of that. And see, he says, which first was mine own king. So he was saying, it's ironic because the only rightful king of the island is the only slave, the only true slave. So, and here you keep me in this hard rock, in this prison, while you do keep me from the rest of the island. Why would he be upset that he's being kept from the rest of the island, apart from the obvious thing that he's in a prison? Why would it be important for him? It's his home. He's got a really deep connection to the land because it's what he's known his whole life. He has known society. So that deep connection to the land is something that's really important to him. And then Prospero says, "Thou must lying slave, whom stripes may move, not kindness. I have used thee, filth as thou art, with human care, and lodged thee in mine own cell, till thou didst seek to violate the honour of my child." So, used, I feel, has a double meaning. I think he means used as in his treatment of of Caliban, but also he has used Caliban to survive on the island. Okay, so it's got a bit of double meaning there. So the attempted rape of Miranda puts the audience into, they first discover, that's a confronting discovery, that Caliban's attempted to rape his only daughter. This really lovely, because we've met Miranda and she's so beautiful and sweet and lovely and innocent that it's quite shocking and confronting that Caliban, who would be portrayed as an ugly, almost deformed monster, has tried to violate this lovely young girl. So do we side with Caliban or not? We have to decide as an audience, do we like him and forgive him and understand? Or are we siding with Prospero, thinking if you were a parent, could you just imagine how that you'd want to kill him. You would want to kill him.
Do you think Shakespeare intentionally had the audience at a point where half of them were Prospero and then the other half were Caliban, or kind of like that?
Contextually, I'm not quite sure. I think because the other was displayed around London, dead or alive, and they were a spectacle, and there was a lot of mistrust around the other, so I don't know. There certainly wouldn't have been the level of understanding that there is now about colonised people and Indigenous people, so I don't...
Sorry for the interruption. Courtney Webb, can I just see you just for a minute, please?
So that's a really good point. I think in a contemporary audience, that's I sided with Caliban when I watched it a while ago. I was your age when I watched it live, and I sided with Caliban because I understood the same things that we're talking about now. He hasn't been socialised and whatnot. But I think in Shakespeare's time, I'm not 100% sure. It's definitely possible, but I don't know the exact attitudes that they might have held. I think, I think it could have gone either way. I think there would be definitely sympathisers in the audience.
Could they have also blamed the girl too?
Could have.
Being provocative. They do that now.
But I don't know, because she's so virtuous and Prospero really emphasises her virtue.
Yeah.
They might not.
It was probably just because she was the only girl.
Yeah, they might not agree with, like, they see her and she's just so sweet and innocent. They would think, no, surely not. Like, she wouldn't have.
I feel like
You know what I mean?
Shakespeare's really like played this like he's definitely like the girl is so innocent that she can
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. Well, it's one of his last plays. It's like he's very experienced at this point in crafting characters and storylines and everything. So I think, yeah, he definitely does play around with a lot of things like that to try and manipulate the audience. So yeah, we discovered that, and that's very confronting for the audience, and we have to reassess whether we're going to value, like, what values we have and which side we're going to be on. Caliban says, oh ho ho, that wouldn't have been done. That did prevent me. I had people else this isle with Caliban. So Caliban sees Miranda as a vessel, and she's seen as a political pawn to populate the island. If there's more Calibans than Prospero, what's going to happen?
Overthrowing.
There's going to be some kind of overthrowing, or he's going to have more power. Interestingly, who else sees Miranda as a political pawn? Prospero, because she secures the marriage with Ferdinand, makes their family wealthy again, look good, and everything's restored. So Prospero uses Miranda as well.
She's
of
just
course,
a
he
means
loves
to
her.
an end for everybody.
She's a
in this
means to an
story.
end for everybody, which is very interesting. So then Miranda so Caliban is not capable of conforming to the colonizer's expectations and behaviours, basically. So he doesn't understand that is something that's wrong, really. Alright, so Caliban says, you taught me language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse. The Red Plague rid you from learning me your language. So Caliban's discovery of language and communication, he sees it as something that's really negative. But who has the most beautiful language in the whole play? Caliban. He speaks so beautifully about nature, and it's so poetic, and the imagery is so strong that it's really interesting.
Between he and Ariel, they both have the better language out of everyone in the play.
Yeah, because they've got that connection to nature. They've got that really genuine, perspective that the colonizers and the castaways, the socialized people, don't necessarily have. And I think that aligns to Gonzalo's utopic idea about what the island would be like. Caliban doesn't view that discovery as beneficial, but maybe the audience can view that discovery as beneficial for Caliban because they see the way that language has shaped him. Then Prospero threatens compliance out of fear. Then Caliban says, an aside, I must obey. His art is of such power, it would control my damned god Setebos and make a vassal out of him. So the audience understands Prospero's power, and so does Caliban. Caliban can only resist so much. Okay, so he says, no, pray thee, don't do that to me. So he's got this fear. We said before in the post-colonial critique that it's this relationship of love and fear. So first they'll have a relationship of love, then that doesn't work out, it moves to a relationship of fear and oppression. And so I don't know if Caliban is saying that because he's letting the audience know that he understands Prospero's power, or it's kind of like further highlighting the colonizer as this powerful being that the other should bow to and obey. You know what I mean? I don't know if it's more of a political thing or a character-driven thing. Ariel's song reinforces the ideas of magic and nature. Ferdinand has this new discovery of the music, which is kind of confusing and illusory because he can't see it, but he can hear it. He doesn't know where it's coming from. He said, this music crept by me upon the waters, allaying both their fury and my passion. So it's got this healing nature of music and the supernatural there. He also said that the music waits upon some god of the island. So comparing Prospero to a god, halfway down page 47 at the moment. Thence I followed it, or draw me rather. So the discovery is sparked by a catalyst. So Ferdinand's discovery is sparked by the Tempest, but also then the music that leads him, the discovery of the music leads him to Prospero and Miranda, where he meets the love of his life. Ariel sings beautifully, full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones are coral made, those are pearls that were his eyes, nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange, sea nymph owling ring his knell. So this idea of transformation, the imagery of death juxtaposed with images of beauty, but also discoveries sometimes are not always factual. We discover information that we believe to be the truth, but how it can be questioned and challenged over time is the fact that we don't always know if a discovery is real or false that we stumble upon or that we seek. Okay, it could be something that's not indeed the truth. Miranda thinks that that Ferdinand's a spirit. Why do you think she thinks he's a spirit? Because
she's never seen anybody else before, so she sees someone walking up to them and she just doesn't know how to react.
Yeah, but also, what's she been around her whole life?
Like the Ariel.
Yeah, like magics and spirits and those kind of things. So that's kind of what she just assumes, that it's not real. So the fact that Ferdinand and Miranda's discovery is planned by Prospero, does it discount or impact upon the serendipitous nature of discovery? Like, does it still, the fact that it's planned and that Miranda and Ferdinand don't know that, does that change the nature of the discovery?
Not really.
Not really?
It's unplanned for them.
It's
So
unplanned
they
for them.
don't know.
So the
It's
same
Prospero's.
ramifications would occur for them as that would occur for anyone whose discovery is completely unplanned. Do you think?
Yeah.
But then Prospero has that knowledge.
Prospero's the only one who knows.
Yeah.
But he
So
kind
it's
of just
point.
like help it go along. with
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It's serendipitous. Like, it's a discovery that's positive, but it's actually planned to be that way. So it's kind of multifaceted. She might call him a thing divine. For nothing natural I ever saw so noble. So this discovery is opening up new worlds and new possibilities for Miranda that she's never experienced before. We discovered that Prospero's wishes for them is to be together, and that he's planned that discovery. And that idea of a planned discovery is a motif, because all the discoveries are planned to some degree. He calls her a goddess, so it's like a bit of a idea about the supernatural. His discovery is one of wonder and awe, and it's a spiritual discovery as well as an emotional one. Be you made or no, the idea that she's both human and a virgin, which is very important, we've addressed. His dad's in the afterlife. He witnessed the discovery, which adheres to the verisimilitude of Prospero's magic. So they've fallen in love. Ferdinand says, "Oh, if a virgin and your affection not gone forth, I'll make you the Queen of Naples." So she's only valuable if she's a virgin. So that's that feminist idea there. He's discovering that Miranda's discovery is that she's discovered a man, another human being, but she's also discovered the experience of love. Prospero wants to make it hard. So he just gives Ferdinand a hard time. He scolds her. He said, "What? I say my foot, my tutor." He scolds Miranda for breaking the place in the patriarchy. And he says, he manipulates Miranda by saying, "Having seen him and Caliban, to most of men this is a Caliban, and to him they are angels." So he plays on her lack of experience and her virtue, and that's pretty much it. And then they sort of they bond together, and Prospero thanks Ariel by saying, "Thou shalt be free as mountain winds, but then do exactly all points of my command." So that's Act 1, Scene 2.